Welcome to the Living While Loving Your Child Through Addiction podcast. Here we focus on self care as we tend to our own lives while also extending love and compassion to our kids. This podcast offers science backed skills to bring hope and healing to your entire family. I just got off a call with a client and we were talking about the effect of having pity on your child versus having compassion for them and the power dynamic that that creates, along with how it impacts your connection with them and even how they see themselves. This comes up a lot, so I knew that I had to do a podcast episode on it. When we pity our kids, we see them as a victim, and that strips them of their agency. We view them as helpless and as if their situation defines them and that they have little to no power to change their situation. And then we feel helpless and we feel hopeless. So it doesn't help us to see them in that light either. And there's often many painful reasons why somebody struggles with substance use. And that creates a lot of guilt and it can shape how we see our kids. It frames them as passively receiving this misfortune in their lives rather than as someone who is struggling but is also capable of resilience, growth, and recovery. And this is why pity can feel so condescending. It places the person who is struggling in this lower position as if they are felt sorry for rather than supported and empowered. But compassion, on the other hand, it does not see somebody as a victim. It sees them as a whole person who just happens to be experiencing the pain and hardship of life. So instead of feeling sorry for them, compassion moves towards trying to understand them and to find ways to help them in a way that still respects their dignity. But pity, it just traps us in our suffering and in the way that we're perceived, while compassion acknowledges that suffering, but it also sees the person's potential to move through it. So, how we respond to our kids' struggle, whether that be with pity or with compassion, can significantly affect us, our kids, our relationship with them, and our ability to support them. Before I go any further on that topic, I want to announce that I am hosting another free Boundaries That Create Connection masterclass on March 25th. I will be teaching the pre-boundary preparation phase. That is what helps you clarify your boundaries so that they are easier to set, so that it's easier to be consistent with them. If you skip this phase, you will not understand the boundaries that you set. You're probably going to feel guilty or angry about them. And either you won't be able to follow through on them or you won't be able to enforce them. So, this is a critical step. Another thing that I'll be going over is the two-part nature of effective boundaries. Boundaries have to have two parts because you can't rely on your child to follow through with the request. This step helps you focus on what you can control so that your boundaries work as you intend them to. The third thing that I'll be covering is how to set boundaries that create more connection. If you're like me, I was terrified to set boundaries because my daughter was already so angry with me because I would just swing from one extreme to the other. She never knew what to expect from me. But once I went through the process of setting boundaries, it repaired our relationship. It created more connection because I became more consistent and predictable. And therefore, I felt safe to her. She always knew what she was going to get from me. And that's just one of the ways that they create connection. We'll also go over why your current boundaries aren't working. We'll go over the most common reasons that boundaries don't work and how you can fix those. This is a live interactive class, so bring your questions. You're going to get to hear from other parents who are going through the same or similar situations. I'm not recording it because I want everybody to feel safe to interact without worrying about who's going to see the recording. So you can sign up using the link in the show notes, or you can go to heatherrosscoaching.com and it says Boundaries Masterclass at the top of my website. You can register there. Then put it on your calendar. I can't wait to see you there. This is the best of what I have to offer about boundaries, and it is absolutely free. It is so worth your time. You're not going to believe that you're getting all of this information for free. If you hear this after March 25th, you can use the link in the show notes to get on the wait list for the next class. Okay, back to pity and compassion. Both pity and compassion involve recognizing someone's struggle or suffering, but they feel very different and they lead to different outcomes. So, I have a story about how been impacted this since my daughter passed away. There is a distinct difference between when I feel compassion versus pity from somebody. So when I meet somebody new and it comes to that point where they ask me how many kids I have, or just anything about kids in general, and I have to share that my daughter passed away, people who pity me, they'll usually say, like, oh, you poor thing, in a way that I can tell that that person believes that nothing like that would ever happen to them. They feel sorry for me. And that's what they see when they see me, is somebody who has been devastated by the loss of a child. And it carries this energy of like a superiority because it could never happen to them. And they feel sorry for me. But then there are people that I feel warmth and compassion from. Those people who know that bad things can happen to anybody. They know it could happen to them. And they still see me as a whole person, a person who is still capable of living a good life. They see my resilience. And luckily, I have not experienced pity very often. Mostly, I experience compassion. But when I feel pity from somebody, I'm out of there. Like I'm over it. I want out of that situation. It creates an immediate disconnect. So now I want you to think about if you're pitying your son or daughter. Maybe you don't even identify ways that you're doing it. You might not do it all the time, So I invite you to keep listening to see if you do come across anything in this episode that you can identify with. Because if you're pitying them, then they're going to sense that you do not see them as capable, and they will feel like you don't connect with their pain because you think that you could never be in the position that they are in to feel that pain. Many parents, myself included, before I learned differently, I have been very humbled by this experience of having a daughter struggling with addiction and then losing her. It's been the most educating, humbling experience. So please, don't think there's any judgment coming from me in this because I see myself in all of it. That's how I learned is by going through these things myself. But a lot of parents unknowingly judge their kids' struggles by believing that it is solely the result of their kids' choices or circumstances, while assuming that their own well being is because they've made better choices. And that idea of looking at, oh, I've just made better choices, really oversimplifies things and ignores the massive role that genetics and environment, trauma, or just even luck play in who struggles with addiction or mental health and who doesn't. So if you think, oh, I would never end up in that situation, it creates this unconscious sense of superiority that distances you from your child instead of helping you connect with them. And they're not going to want help from you in that case. True compassion means recognizing that suffering is not just about choices. It is about circumstances, wiring in our brains, and factors outside of anybody's control. You might not even realize that you're doing it, but when you're thinking that way, you end up making your son or daughter feel inferior or patronize. And that can easily unintentionally diminish their dignity. And being pitied does not feel supportive, like I described earlier, how I feel. I don't feel supported when somebody pities me when I tell them that my daughter passed away. I don't feel understood. I don't feel respected. Instead, I end up feeling like embarrassed or ashamed or resentful, right? And your kids can end up feeling the same way. And then that's just a barrier in the relationship. And then it's just like more stuff that I have to work through about it if I do experience that pity. But compassion goes way beyond feeling bad for somebody. It involves empathy and the desire to help. So, compassion is when you see your child struggle without taking their dignity. So, when I was judging Helena for her struggles, I wasn't treating her in a dignified manner at all. In fact, I wouldn't have treated anybody else that way. And it pains me to say that. I regret it, but I had to learn from my mistakes. I had to learn to see our common humanity and start seeing our similarities instead of our differences and start treating her like I would want to be treated before our relationship changed. And once that changed, once I started seeing our common humanity, seeing our similarities instead of our differences, Then she started opening up to receiving help from me. And that's when I really started to understand her and to see that, there was nothing special about me, that I wasn't struggling like her. I started to see that it could have easily been me. I was just born with this fear that kept me from taking drug or alcohol use too far. And she just wasn't born with that same fear. She was born jumping off of cliffs. I never wanted to jump off of any cliffs. So I started to recognize that this wasn't like just some choice that I had made. I wasn't just better, that we weren't actually really so different. And maybe had some things happened differently in my life, it could have easily been me and not her. And and I know that she could feel that shift in me, that change from pity and judgment to compassion. Compassion is this warm, active concern. It starts with empathy, that feeling with someone. And it also includes an urge to help. Now, helping does not mean fixing. Helping can just be deeply listening and honoring your child's experience so that they feel seen and heard and valued. You want them to feel that way rather than feeling judged or minimized by pity. When you're expressing that kind of compassion, just being in it with them, they're automatically going to know how much you care. And they're going to know that they are no longer alone, that you are in it with them. And that builds this deep trust and safety that will strengthen your relationship. Now, pity might be a natural reaction, it's a default, right? To seeing your kid struggle or the things that they have gone through, but it just causes more pain and disconnection. But compassion, on the other hand, it requires more effort. It took a lot for me to actually learn what compassion was. I didn't really know much about any emotions. I had to gain that emotional intelligence. It requires more effort, but it's worth it because it leads to healing and it can turn this hardship into an opportunity for kindness and connection. I want to end this episode with 7 ways to shift from pity to compassion. Number 1 is to notice your initial reaction, just being self aware, paying attention to your thoughts and feelings, what you are thinking about what your child is going through. Recognizing I'm feeling pity versus I'm feeling compassion. Just pause and decide to respond differently. Number 2, once you catch that pity response, frame it, reframe it, right? Instead of viewing your son or daughter as fundamentally different for you or different than you or unfortunate compared to you, try to put yourself in their shoes and imagine what they must be experiencing. And this will shift your mindset from looking at their suffering and judging it to understanding it by feeling with them. That automatically opens the door to compassion. So ask yourself, how would I feel in this situation? And What would I want or need from somebody else if I was in this situation? Number three is to listen without judgment and to be present, be in the moment. One of the simplest ways to move into compassion is to just actively listen to your child. If they're talking about a problem, instead of trying to fix it or think ahead, just give them your full attention. Don't interrupt. Don't give advice. Sometimes all a person needs is to be heard and to have somebody validate their feelings and show that they care. That might just mean sitting with them in silence, giving them a hug, trying to stay just calm and attentive. It's really a powerful gift when you can just be with somebody without trying to fix them. Number four, offer to help in a way that respects their dignity and autonomy. It can just be practical help or even a small gesture. To shift in compassion, think about those small things that you can do. You don't have to solve the problem, just doing something nice for them. There were times when I had no idea what I could do to help Helena, but I did her laundry for her. That was actually good for both of us because I loved just getting to do something for her, but I would go pick her laundry up. I would wash her clothes and make sure they smelled really good. And I would fold them and bring them back to her. And it was just became one of the ways that I could easily show her love. Another time she had gotten her wisdom teeth pulled. She was in a lot of pain. We found out later that they had left some bone fragments in there and they got infected. But we didn't know that at the time yet. And I didn't understand why she was in so much pain and nothing was touching the pain. So I just laid in bed with her. That didn't fix her problem, but I was just with her and comforted her in a way that respected her autonomy and her dignity. I was just with her without being able to fix her. Number five is use compassionate language. So anything that's going to validate their feelings without diminishing them. You want to try to uplift with your words rather than put them down or try to make them feel different or talk them out of how they feel. And as you practice this compassionate language, it just naturally changes your mindset over time so that you automatically just shift to compassion. Number six is just checking in with your intentions before you offer to help. Just ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to help my son or daughter? Am I looking for credit from them or recognition? Or am I trying to feel like a good person? Am I trying to make myself feel better? When you look at it, I mean, when I started looking at this for myself, what I recognized was, you know, I, I used to always say, well, I just want to help her. But I really just wanted to help myself just as much. I was trying to relieve my own pain and suffering as much as I was trying to relieve hers. And it went really far for me to honor and recognize that a lot of it was just as much about me as it was about her, which helped me to stay compassionate and not so resentful when I recognized the motivation behind the actions that I was taking. And number seven is by practicing these steps, you're going to naturally build empathy and maintain respect, and supportive action. So each time you catch yourself pitying your son or daughter, think of it as an opportunity to practice compassion instead. And not only will this help them, it will help you. When you're practicing compassion, and I felt this way too, when I shifted from judgment and pity with my daughter and shifted into compassion, I no longer felt so helpless. I started to see her as somebody who was actually quite capable, even though she was struggling. Like she was a survivor. She was 18 years old and figuring out how to live on her own in a way that I never could have. I couldn't today, honestly, go through the things that she went through. So I really just started seeing her, that common humanity, seeing her as a whole person who was capable of helping herself. And she just needed support. And that changed how I felt. That made me feel hopeful again. So that's it for today. Don't forget to sign up for the Boundaries That Create Connection Masterclass. And if you found this episode helpful, it would be so helpful to me if you would take a moment to leave a 5-star review. Your feedback really matters because it helps other parents find this podcast so that they can get the help that they need. And if you are tired of feeling stuck and scared and unsure of what to do next, you can schedule a Road to Recovery call with me. We explore what's possible for you and your family and the changes that you can make with the right support from somebody who really understands what you're going through. You do not have to navigate this alone. You can sign up for a Road to Recovery call on my website or in the show notes. Until next time, remember that taking care of yourself is not a luxury. It is a necessity and it sets a great example because you matter too.